You have an opportunity with every single interaction to create a more inclusive culture. We were not very good at really hearing all the voices. The real challenges were in how we interacted and how we collaborated or didn't collaborate. We need diversity of thought. We need diversity of background. We need unique ways of seeing the world. Unless people feel that they are part of the inner group and that they're going to be respected and their ideas are going to be welcomed, they're going to hold back. What we really have to do is get curious and interested in the people who are going to challenge us. You can't get to this feeling of inclusion, belonging, unless people feel psychologically safe. I think with hybrid, we can really leverage digital tools and we can run better and more inclusive meetings. We have to get uncomfortable because this work is messy. Human beings are messy. It's not black and white. It's all shades of gray.
Minette, great to have you. I wonder if you'd mind saying a few words to introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, Tom. Yeah, so today what I do is I'm an author, I'm a speaker, and I'm a consultant, and I focus on inclusive leadership and teams. And before doing this work, I spent 30 years in Silicon Valley in the software industry.
Wow, okay. So maybe let's get a little bit into that journey. How did you go from the software industry in Silicon Valley to becoming an expert in this field?
Yeah, and I hesitate a little at the word expert, so I'll park that one for a moment. I'll
You're
say we are
very
all works in
modest.
progress and I'm learning as I go. But how I got into this work was really while I was still in Silicon Valley. My last job was that I was a VP of engineering practice at Autodesk in San Francisco.
Right.
And my charter was to transform how we developed software in the company. But
Hmm.
what I realized is that much more than technology focus, although we did have technology challenges, the real challenges were in how we interacted and how we collaborated or didn't collaborate. And so I started getting very, very interested in reading everything I could on human behavior and interaction and even neuroscience and how do humans collaborate, and really getting into listening and empathy and diversity and inclusion and all these topics that were very much new, in at least to me.
Yes.
We're talking like 2014 to 2019 was the period in which I was really exploring this. And more in my job, I was focusing on the human aspects of work rather than technology, even though I was leading engineering.
Yes. Yes.
And honestly, that's what got me excited and energized. And that's what I found both the most interesting and the most challenging. And I found that we were not very good, and we were not alone. We were not very good at really hearing all the voices and making sure that everyone in the company, no matter what their location, their culture, their background, they felt that they could fully participate and that their ideas were welcome. And I know you focus on innovation. We too were very focused on innovation. And I felt like we were not tapping into the full talent that we had because people were quiet and people held back. And ultimately, I had to leave. I was actually forced out of my job at some point,
Right.
and that was no fun. But what I will tell you is that it was the right moment because I realized what I needed to do next, or what I wanted to do that next in this phase of my career, and that was to help leaders truly tap into the full potential and talent of their teams. And that's the work that I'm doing now.
Amazing. And I mean, that's all music to my ears. As you say, I think we've hopefully moved quite a long way in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, but this is still something leaders grapple with day to day. So, as you say, there's a focus really with our audience on innovation. Can you help me by making the kind of business case, if you will, for diversity and inclusivity when it comes to innovation?
Yes, and there's lots of research behind this. So I'm not going to even cite studies, but we all know they're out there that
Yeah.
what when we're trying, and this is true, like not if you're trying to do automated tasks, but if you are trying to innovate and solve complex business problems or complex technical or creative problems,
Mm.
we need diversity of thought, we need diversity of background, we need unique ways of seeing the world. And it doesn't happen when you get a group of a homogeneous team together because
Yeah.
everyone thinks alike. We get into that group think that's very common, honestly, in the business world where everyone just kind of converges very quickly on an idea and no one pokes holes in it and no one challenges it. And for innovation, as you well know, Tom, we need we need the wild ideas. We need the
Yes.
ideas that come from way over here and that seem wacky and wild and this is never going to work. We need people to be proposing those ideas. And people have those ideas. I will
They do.
guarantee people in your teams already have those ideas. But the problem, and here's the connection with diversity and inclusion here, is that unless people feel that they are part of the inner group and that they're going to be respected and
Mm.
their ideas are going to be welcomed, they're going to hold back. They're not going to share that far out idea. They're likely going to agree with the dominant group and say,
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds good, even if they don't believe it, because they're afraid that they'll be marginalized or excluded or even humiliated for sharing that new idea that's very different from what we've already thought about. The place I talk about in my book and in my work with leaders always is that we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with how we're showing up in interacting with people and really get a greater sense of self awareness. Because I'll tell you what happens if we don't have that self awareness. You probably know, right? We are drawn to the people who are most like us. And in fact, as leaders, I've seen this happen so often. It's very tempting. We hire people who are like us. We listen to the people who agree with us. And don't we all love it when people agree with us, of course? And so, what we really have to do is get curious and interested in the people who are going to challenge us. And those are often the people who are very different from us in background, personality, education, ways of seeing the world. And these are the people where we may not have natural empathy. And I talk about empathy is such a critical business skill for leaders. And it back. I remember when I was starting to talk about empathy, people looked at me a little bit strange, like, "Really, we're going to talk about this?" Now it's been recognized as a critical leadership skill. I think Forbes had an article last year saying empathy is the top skill for leaders. So why empathy is hard for us when we're dealing with people who are different from us? It's because of this innate natural tendency as human beings to find ourselves in basically groups and tribes of people like us. So as leaders, we have to practice, and I use this word deliberately, practice having empathy for the people we don't naturally connect with. And that may be the person in your team who, just you don't click with. That may be the person who's going to have the breakthrough idea you need. But you as a leader are going to have to say, like, how am I showing up with this person? Am I truly open to their point of view? Am I listening to them? Or am I just trying to prove them wrong? Am I getting defensive whenever they speak? And so we really do have to start with our own way of showing up in the world as leaders.
Can we just then turn to the question of where there are some pitfalls? Where you may be willing, you may be good intention, but what are the sort of bear traps that we should watch out for as leaders?
It's dangerous territory, right? The pitfalls is a good
Absolutely.
word because it is so true. And in fact, I've seen this with so many leaders I've talked to and worked with is the minute we start to say, okay, we're going to work on all of these topics of diversity, equity,
Mm.
inclusion, belonging, there's this big fear of I'm going to get it wrong.
Hmm.
As a leader, and as leaders, we want to get it right. We want to, not be the ones who make a terrible mistake and a belly flop.
Yeah.
And yet, what I always encourage is, and in fact, I talk about this in the book, is that we have to get uncomfortable because this work is messy. Human beings are messy. It's
Yeah.
not black and white, it's all shades of gray. And as we enter into really working on, I'm going to be a more inclusive leader, we have great intentions. And I think most leaders do. I think the truly, we talk about toxic leaders. I think there are toxic leaders, but I think they're the exception. I
Yep.
think most leaders really want to do the right thing and they want to bring out the best in their team members, but they often get stuck because they're afraid of making a mistake. And so what I would encourage is just to realize we will make mistakes along the way. And it
Mhm.
can be something as simple like to ask for what is a pitfall is like, how language is evolving so rapidly. And there's a new book out about inclusive language that I've got on my desk. I haven't yet read. I think it's called The Field Guide to Inclusive Language. Because language is evolving so quickly, we may use a term that offends someone. In
Yes.
fact, we probably will. And so rather than saying, I'm just not going to say anything, we do our best and we apologize if we get called out. And I should probably say when we get called out. And then we say, I am so sorry. And thank you for letting me know that I should use a different term here. And I'm
Yeah.
going to do better. And so I think it's that willingness to be a little bit vulnerable, which is often hard for leaders. Realize you're not going to be perfect. No one is. And that's a little bit why I balk at the term expert when we talk about topics of DEI, because I don't think there is one person in the world who is truly an expert in all aspects of everything related to DEI, because there's too much. And
Yes.
even our understanding of it is evolving, right? I mean, look at what's going on in the world right now. We don't even know we don't have the vocabulary to talk about conflict and disagreement. And so I think that's where we just have to give ourselves a little bit of leeway and say, I'm going to really go in on this. I believe strongly in this. I'm committed to being boldly inclusive, knowing I will not be perfect along the way. And I'm going to learn as I go, and I will repair the harm that I do when that happens.
So maybe let's talk a little bit more about how you better facilitate psychological safety, because that's clearly an important consideration when it comes to being an inclusive leader. What does it really take? How can you help us unpack how to do that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question, Tom, because I do believe that psychological safety is foundational to creating an inclusive culture, and that you kind of can't get there. You can't get to this feeling of inclusion, belonging, unless people feel psychologically safe. So
Mm,
first of all, what does that mean?
mm,
It means that in a group setting, that everyone feels that they can ask a question, they can make a mistake, they can be themselves to the
mm,
extent that they want to be themselves at work. They can take a risk, they can share that wild idea, and they know that they will not be marginalized or embarrassed or excluded as a
mm.
result of that. So, in a nutshell, that's what psychological safety is. And it's, I co-wrote a book, the Psychological Safety Playbook. And the reason Caroline Helbig, my co-author, and I wrote that book is because there's a lot of academic research about the importance of psychological safety. And I think we understand that now. But
Yeah.
we wrote this book because there wasn't a lot of how-to information. And so I'll just share a few ideas from that book as to where do we start. So especially as leaders, we do set the tone. And so we can't come in and just declare this is a psychologically safe meeting, so everyone speak up, right? People don't believe that. And I've
Yeah.
certainly heard people say it, but it's not very convincing until you see the evidence that it really is safe. And so, you as a leader can start by opening up yourself. And for example, if you, Tom, are getting up and presenting a new strategy to your team, you can say, look, I've worked with a bunch of people. I think this is really the way we need to go. And yet I am also sure that there's something I've missed.
Yes.
And so tell me, I really want to know, what am I missing? What
Yeah.
have I not seen here? What have I not thought of? Those kinds of questions are super inviting because they are actually saying, I am not perfect. I don't know everything. And I want to hear from other perspectives. And so that's a nice opener.
I love
And
it.
it's a question we don't get a lot. I mean, in all my years in business, I rarely heard leaders ask that question. And so that's a great starting point. And of course, then let's say you really do get someone who says, Tom, I think you missed a huge point here. Now, then you have to double down on how you listen and
Mm,
how you respond and how you don't maybe react automatically. So, for example, one of the things that happens a lot is we get challenged, we get defensive.
hmm.
That's our brain. That's just
Guilty.
it, we all do. No, and it's you know what it is? It's guilty of being human, basically. because, and I learned this in a lot of reading that I did about the defensive. When we get defensive, it is our brain doing its job, and our brain is designed to keep us alive and safe. And so when we're
Mm,
challenged, our brain is actually worried that we're in danger, and it doesn't distinguish physical danger from social or emotional danger. So when I say you've missed a huge point, your brain goes into that fight, flight, freeze
yeah.
defensive mode. And if you don't realize what's happening, you're likely to respond in an automatic way, which is often fight, right? That fight, flight, freeze. Fight would mean you would lash back out at me and say, Minette, how dare you? Or, something that would then shut me down. And so we have to really take that moment to pause and take that one breath, or whatever it is, take that one sip of water, so we can collect our thoughts and we can say, thank you. I really hadn't thought of that. I need more time to process, or let's explore that, or follow up in a positive way, so that then you're rewarding the person who challenged you, and
Mm.
you're signaling to everyone else who witnessed that exchange, oh, Tom actually means it when he says, what am I missing? He wants us to challenge him. And that's how we start to create these conditions where people believe it's psychologically safe. I think, first of all, just getting out of our little bubble of proximity bias and realizing that there is talent everywhere. There are great ideas everywhere. And I need to, whether it is, get on a tour and make sure I meet people in offices all around the world. I used to do that when I had global teams. I would make time to go to each of the offices where I had staff, and not just get up and do an all hands, but actually have office hours and start to talk to people all over the globe, and realize this is where I hear the truth. And even like the first time I show up somewhere, probably not. But then if I keep showing up there and people get to know that, oh, she really is open to hearing from me, I'll start to hear about things that no one told me, equity issues, or great things going on that no one knows about, right? Like little bubbles of innovation over in Singapore, but the people there are not getting the attention of the people in the headquarters. And so we have to get out of our bubbles, whatever those may be. And they may be geographical, or they may be ideological, or they may be personality bubbles, whatever they are. We have to actively seek out what's happening elsewhere and get to know the people elsewhere. And I will tell you, and you know this as well, dealing with different cultures is both like so enriching and also very challenging, because we communicate very differently in different cultures. And so you may not hear the truth. People know, like, especially if you go to countries in Asia where hierarchy is very endemic to those cultures, and you show up as the VP or the CEO, people are not going to be open with you or challenge you, and certainly not right away, right? Because that is deeply against their culture. So you're going to have to find other ways to really communicate across different cultures. And so there's lots there to unpack.
So, Minette, we now very much live in this world of hybrid working, remote working. Some companies are fully remote. Some companies are trying to get people back to the office with greater or lesser success. Does this have an impact on inclusivity?
It can be a really great tool for greater inclusion.
Mm,
And the reason I think this is that, as I was saying before, when you're in the office in the old days, there was always the inner circle,
yeah.
and then there was everyone else. And I think with hybrid work, we can just say we're all everybody else. Everyone is like maybe the headquarters idea goes away a little bit. Some companies have said they no longer have a
Yes.
headquarters. And so,
Yes.
right, which I think is great. I think more of just saying, no matter where you are working, no matter how you are working, you belong here. You are part of this workforce. We value you. We respect you. We invite your voice. We invite your ideas.
Mm,
And I think one of the things that even our tools, our digital tools, can help us be more inclusive. So I'm going to come to meetings just briefly to talk
yes.
about
Yes.
meetings is a huge topic for me, because I think meetings often embody your corporate culture,
Yes.
right? They demonstrate who gets listened to, who's in that inner circle, who gets ignored, who stays silent. And so I think with hybrid, we can really leverage digital tools, and we can run better and more inclusive meetings. And
Yes.
we can do things like turn taking, which we rarely do in a physical setting. But on Zoom or other collaboration tools, sometimes you have to. And sometimes that's the best way to say, like, we're going to discuss this one topic and I want to hear from everyone. We're going to time box it. No one's going to dominate the airtime, and we're going to go around the virtual table. It's actually really inclusive. And then I do need to add, though, that there's still going to be people who don't want to speak.
Yeah.
And so we have other ways of making sure we can hear their voices with great digital tools like online whiteboards, which I know you use a lot in the
Yeah,
innovation
yeah,
space.
absolutely.
And right. And I
Even
found
chat, good old chat,
chat,
right? It can
exactly.
be a great way in meetings, for people who aren't comfortable with speaking in a more public environment, to
So true.
share ideas or thoughts or questions. So, as you say, you have lots of tools at your fingertips. Think about how you use these for different audiences. Minette, if we can just wrap up, I'd love it if you could just give us one or two final takeaways. If there's nothing else you took away from this wonderful conversation, what would you want people to walk away remembering?
Mm. Well, I would say one, it's in your hands, and that you have an opportunity with every single interaction to create a more inclusive culture. And part of that is for you, especially if you're a leader, to get a little bit out of your comfort zone and really get to know and invite the ideas from people who challenge you and who you don't naturally connect with. And that's where I think you're going to discover that you have talent you didn't even realize you had. And you're going to have some breakthroughs, and you're going to be able to create a culture where everyone can thrive.